Hey guys, I'm going to show you another FlipPilot how-to on customizing your deal pipeline. So this basically, the deal pipeline encompasses basically your workflow, right? For getting a lead coming into the new column over here on the left of your screen, and then moving that through to completion, to closing, selling, wholesaling, retailing, whatever you do. This is showing you what you're working on a daily basis and where the properties that you're working currently are. Your active leads, through your active deals, through the stuff that you're closing on and working on. This is kind of like a digital whiteboard, right? It's like the whiteboard in the office of which properties are where, so you can see stuff at a glance. All right, and if you haven't read or seen a video yet about the color coding, basically you've got a time that each record can be in the status that you set, okay? And so that could either be a time frame, an interval of time like 2 hours or 2 days, or that could be a specified date and time. So in situations where status is like closing, where you have a closing, there's going to be a date and time for the closing. If you're rehabbing a property, you're going to probably have a rehab end date so that you know it shouldn't be in that status longer than that, because that's what you set for that rehab to finish. And for other situations like a new record, you might want to only give yourself no more than 2 hours to get in contact with them and move them into appointment set or whatever the next step is in your workflow. And so the color coding shows you which ones are past that time, okay, given the different status. So for this new column, we're showing 2 hours is acceptable here, and appointment set's got a required date because that is the date the appointment is, okay? And so if that record's still there after that appointment date and time, it's going to go red. So at a glance, you can quickly see what properties you're working and which ones have been in the status longer than they should be, so you know what to work. And we have an algorithm that bubbles up each of these columns, the records, based on when they're coming due and when they're due. So the red will always be at the top, the green will be at the bottom, and if they're getting close to that due date and due time, it's going to be yellow, okay? So you can see at a glance which ones have been there a long time. So you work those first and make your way down the list. So how do you edit these? How do you modify all this stuff? So we come with a good default workflow, a pipeline, but that doesn't work for everybody. You might have a different process, a different workflow, and so you can modify this to your heart's desire, to your heart's content, to make it work for your business. So new, if we click on the green dots there, we can see that we can change the position of the column. We can set the acceptable time, which, like I said, is either a time period specified in hours. So if you want to do days, just put 48 hours for 2 days, that kind of thing. Makes it really flexible. Or you can require a date. So when the record goes into that column, that part of your workflow, it will require you to set the date and time. You can also give a checklist of tasks that happen, that get added to the record once it gets into that status, to make sure that your team is doing the work it needs to do while the property is in that part of your workflow, okay? So on a high level, you get a new lead, you try to make contact with them, so you move it over into the column for contact not made. Let's say you tried to make contact, and now you might set up some scheduled calls. You can look at the video on the feature focus of scheduled calls to find out more about that. And then if you have an appointment set, you drag it over into appointment set, and since this one's a required date and time, I'm going to have the appointment probably tomorrow at, like, say 2 p.m. And so now I've got that set up, and the record's moving along. So now it's green and it's at the bottom, right? Because it's the one furthest away from right now, which is necessary. You can see this one's red. This appointment set record for McCullough, this was last Wednesday at 2 o'clock. Why hasn't this record moved into negotiating or follow-up? Why hasn't that happened? Okay, so that's something that we can look at and address as we're working our leads and deals in this pipeline. Now let's say we want another status here. We want something in the middle, or we want to change. You can change these, change the name of it, or whatever you want, or you can add one right in the middle. So if we click up here to this add, I can add a status, is what's going to add a column here into this pipeline. So if I add status, I can say, let's see, what would make sense here? Negotiating. I'm going to say something like Should have thought about this before I recorded the video. Let's see, negotiating, or maybe between appointment set and negotiating, we can say firming up numbers or something like that. I mean, I don't typically do that, but firming numbers. And we'll just have a column here just to show you how this works. Now it says where to place this column. I'm going to place this after, before negotiating, which is after appointment set. And then, you know, the acceptable time, I'm going to say, I'm just going to give 24 hours. I don't want that to be too long that we're firming up the numbers, right? That probably should only be a couple hours, if anything. And I'm not going to put a checklist on this one. So let's go ahead and create that. And you can see now I have a new part of my workflow, a new part of my pipeline here that I can drag records into and work. So that's how you modify and update your workflow in your pipeline within FlipPilot. Super powerful. The best thing is that you see all of this stuff at a glance, right? Seeing the color coding and tweaking it to make sure that it makes sense for you that a record becomes read at a certain time based on what you specified for that part of your workflow and your pipeline. And we also show you different things like, you know, the lead temperature on the card here and who you have assigned to that record, everything right here on the pipeline. So that's how you customize your deal pipeline. Make use of that and tweak it as you go to improve your workflow and have that pipeline model that for you. Make sure you subscribe to the FlipPilot YouTube channel. Click the bell button to make sure you get notifications of these videos, of all the cool stuff that we're constantly adding to FlipPilot. And thanks a lot for being a customer. Really appreciate it.